Welcome back. Let's now cross over to our sister station, Spice FM, and listen to the discussion on fuel prices, taxes, and the supplementary budget.
Yeah, what does that mean, James, to you?
Well, it means that there is there's something or someone who stands out, either in positive or negative, depends on how you look at it, and either to be consulted or not to be consulted, to make people's life miserable or to make people's life good. Yeah.
There'll be one everywhere.
There'll be one everywhere.
Okay. Every year there's one supplementary budget.
Or more.
Or more. At least one white chicken, at least one supplementary budget every year, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this one, to the tune of 200 billion shillings, okay? And we throw the words about, we pass it around like a hot potato. Can we start with some definitions? Because I think it's always necessary, even as we have these conversations, that there are very many people, Kenyans, who are thinking, okay, so what does this mean? So we have the budget that takes place middle of the year, June, July. That's going to go over the next 12 or so calendar months and how the country is going to spend. And then maybe 4 or 5 months after that, there's a supplementary budget. What is it and why is that?
Well, I think we need, first of all, for people to understand the budget making process, right? Through the process of the formulation, the approval, the implementation, and oversight. There are key 4 stages. And in those 4 stages, the formulation stage is where we have the main budget for the year being discussed and public participation taking place, and then decision is made by Parliament before end of every June. And then the President signs the budget itself. Now, our Constitution anticipated that there could be unforeseen emergencies, unforeseen circumstances that would require the government to spend money that it has not been budgeted. But it also provided that it should that formulation stage. So by the time you're finishing the budget, there are things that have risen that were not seen. And so immediately you start implementing the budget, then you realize there are things that needs to be taken care of in a legal manner. And so that creates the need for supplementary budget. And for this case, we're talking about the first supplementary budget for the 2023-2024 financial year, arising. And one of the things that we are seeing being provided as the need for this supplementary budget is to make provisions for repayment of loans. The last 4 months, between July, August, September, and now October, we've seen our stock of public debt increase by around 382 billion because of depreciation of the Kenya shillings. Now, that could be a factor that they foresee coming, and they need to provide that because it was not provided in the budget. Now, of course, that also means that there are other things that they need to spend money on. And supplementary budget is the most abused process because it's not exhaustive with regards to public participation. In generating the mainstream budget for the financial year, there is exhaustive mechanisms for participation by citizens and stakeholders. But the current supplementary budget, the only thing we are seeing happening is parliamentary committees interacting with ministries and state departments.
Yes.
Denying citizens an opportunity to engage and question, why have you cut development budget by around 41 billion? And why have you increased the current budget by 82 billion?
It almost sounds to me like you're saying that because we know that there will be a process for the supplementary budget to take place, that folks already beforehand know where they will cut and put money.
Yeah. Absolutely, that is one of the mainstream fears that we've had over the last many years that have been assessing the open budget survey for Kenya, where there is no opportunity for supplementary budget participation, and also to a greater extent that it's one of the greatest avenues of corruption. Because then there are few questions being raised on how we are making these decisions. It's a last-minute transactions and saying, because if we put this item during the mainstream budgeting, people will see it because the scrutiny is very high. But when we take it to the supplementary budget, then few eyes are there for review of this.
I have a question. Because yes, there's the 200 billion allocated to the depreciation of the shilling, and therefore we need to pay the interest on the loans. So that makes sense. But there was also talk about increase in expenditure in the offices of the two first and second lady. Is that the term?
Sure.
So such expenditures, when they're increased to the tune of 300 million as reported, what does a Kenyan read into that? What was increased? What services were being offered to Kenyans? What was the logic behind such a move, for example?
Well, it's a very tricky and fluid scenario. First of all, you need to notice that in the mainstream budget, the program-based budget that we had, there was no, I think I can't recall seeing the breakdown between the president and the deputy president office. It was the presidency. Mm-hmm. But now it's been broken down into two. Mm-hmm. There is a deputy president, which had zero allocation, now has an allocation. Mm-hmm. Essentially. But the money is still within the presidency. So you cannot tell where it's being spent.
Okay.
Right? But there is an allocation that indicates that. But also, it's a way of saying we don't want just to increase because politically, if we just left it at probably the thinking would be if you left it at the presidency, then it's only seen to be state house where it's happening. But if you separate it and say there is now we have introduced the element of deputy president element here, you say even the deputy president is spending money, not just the presidency. So that's what we led into it. But initially, it was just the presidency, because that's ideally the way the constitution sees it. But now in planning to break down where let's say the AIE holder, authority to incur expenditure holder, lies within the office of the deputy president. Now that's where it's been placed, but it did not exist previously. But it's appeared in this particular.
Yeah, but why the increase in the budget?
You have to sustain the offices you put into power.
My question is, you see, this is my question. Yeah. There was a budget in the presidency, all right? Yeah. As far as we know, there has been no emergency in the presidency. There was not a third lady that popped up suddenly. There was, we don't need a new state house. And the reason we're asking this is in times when Kenyans are being asked to tighten their belts, we want to see the presidency tighten its belt. Right? Yeah. That's why I'm asking this question.
Yeah. Well, you see, we need money to fund the current expenditure, not even development.
Put the lights on, keep the lights on, paid salaries, keep the water running.
You see? And we have to, and you have to see this clearly from this supplementary budget, that the current expenditure has gone up. While we're being told to tighten our belt. And so what we need to ask is, it's more questions around now the transparency and accountability, because these questions at this particular point, to a greater extent, and this is very good because there's an avenue of raising this. Parliament, the Budget and Appropriations Committee, ought to raise these questions. Why is our current expenditure, rising? This great tree. And I mean, I understand one of the known scholars said governments are full of wastage, and the only thing we can say is unless there is proof it's not wastage, part of wastage, then how do we lock in this? It's now up to citizen action. It's these conversations having to drive this citizen action, the conversations that need to be active every day.
So James, look, there's a budget, right? The supplementary budget then comes in because something may have come up that we maybe didn't foresee, or actually did foresee and said, well, don't worry about it because there'll be a supplementary budget. Because it is not that you necessarily move things around within your budget, but that you're looking for more money to tack on to what you've already told the country you're going to spend. Is it not?
That's true.
You're not only moving things around or removing some money here or removing others there. You're asking for more money. That's why it's supplementary. It's in addition to, right?
Yeah.
Are we often able to trace where, and if truly, the money that then goes into the supplementary budget is spent on the things, for example, what the Budgets and Appropriations Committee has been discussing over the last 2 weeks, can we actually see that this supplementary budget goes to the line items that they've discussed that it would? Leave public participation aside, because, dead in the water, that one is not happening. But now you say this is a supplementary budget, this is what we're going to do with it. Will you then be able to see, yes, 10% of it then went to tack onto recurrent expenditure, that there was something needed in the presidency and then it went to that, was something needed for that, it actually went to that. Can we see that?
No, it's not possible.
Why?
Because of the opaque nature of budgets. For example, a lot of increase of this has happened in the presidency. So how open and transparent are the audit accounts for the presidency, for example? We get to see the audit report saying, we cannot ascertain the value of these resources years in, years out. And it's the same case that's happening in this. So it's extremely, very difficult. And those are the things that we need to see progressively. The demand around, especially, civil society actors, and we'd like to see even the private sector demanding, is that we need to see a little more granular breakdown of where these resources are going. It's, for example, government raising money through an infrastructure board. Which infrastructure are they borrowing money
one?
Like this one they've just closed yesterday or something, last week, right? It's an infrastructure board.
But on what?
Can they point us which infrastructure it is?
And if we are
during Kibaki's government, an infrastructure board was accompanied by the infrastructure it's going to fund.
But isn't that obvious?
Yeah, it's supposed to be. It's infrastructure. So you need to see that. But now there is no, this infrastructure board are the ones that have been coming. None of them can tell us we are going to construct this road or this affordable houses. That's why we are taking an infrastructure board to augment this. So they're taking an infrastructure board for recurrent expenditure to pop up the budget, which again, it's against the law.
So this is illegal.
It is.
Let me ask, what does it mean to a lay Kenyan in this illegality that also then increases recurrent expenditure by 82 billion and reduces development by 41 billion? To the person listening at home, what does that mean for them in shillings and cents, price of food, what they will eat, work, opportunities, etc.?
Reducing infrastructure development budget and development budget, everything is development. Let's say capital budget. Reducing by 41 billion, it means roads, water services, worth this amount of money. Constructing a hospital worth 41 billion is not going to happen. But we are going to pay sitting allowances worth around 81 billion.
Wow.
This is what I want. I would want.
I need you to say that again.
It means recurrent expenditure means it's everything. It's mandazi. In the office.
Yes.
It's tea in the office.
Yeah.
It's flowers that are cut and brought to the office that we are going to fund. It's recurrent. That's the consumed things every day that they consume. But cutting 41 billion worth of development expenditure in the roads, it means if they were supposed to pay the location costs to complete the Nyeri Malwa Road, it is going to take much longer because there's no money to compensate for compensation so that the road can progress, right? It means if there was a contractor who had that contract and they had taken a loan and their machines are staying idle because they cannot be paid, it also means that there is potential that contractor will be auctioned by a bank. This is what I would want people to see. So anytime the development expenditure, and most of them, there were contracts that were committed, or it means a new road that was supposed to be constructed to create employment for our young people is not going to be contracted. But it means 81 billion worth of recurrent expenditure. When people sit in a meeting and they get paid allowances, we're going to require more taxes from Kenyans to pay for that. We have to borrow much more at a higher rate. It almost means we are going to cloud out. The private sector is going to find it very difficult
in order to do that. Constitutionally, however, as is prescribed for Kenya, the only kind of borrowing you can do is for development.
Absolutely.
Or in the case whereby there's an emergency there's a fiscal deficit and you need to then match, but only to a particular percentage, right?
Yeah.
So all of this that's happening is an illegality, as we say, and it continues to recur, but it seems to be happening in broad daylight and there are no questions asked and it just continues in that manner. Is it because the illegality doesn't slap us in the face as an illegality because, it's wrapped up in constitutionality?
It shows the inefficiency, the ineffectiveness of our parliamentary system, or parliament. Because as I would like to blame very much the guys at the Treasury or the executive, but the person who holds the whip and says this cannot happen is in Parliament. That's the person who approves. That's the one who legalizes that illegality. Because there is no budget that is expended in this country without the seal of Parliament. I would like to see Parliament, take a much more stronger role. But we know they are not going to do that because Parliament. It's a Parliament that considers itself in government. So you wonder, and it's good because they have to support the political party that took them to power. They have to be whipped in that direction. But once in a while, when they think about which type of a country they are living in, they need to make a decision that aligns to parliamentary interests, not just political interests. Yeah.
So are you saying that the decisions being made by our parliament are purely driven by political interests and not, you said parliamentary, I'll call them national and civilian interests?
Yeah, of course, including fear of being caught by their political party bosses and being told we will whip you from that committee if you go against this party direction. And I think I would really love to see our parliament, our minority, especially, we have a minority and we know they speak out once in a while, but our minority has also gone into silence, right? Because the majority will have their way in the political parties, in a parliamentary system.
Yeah.
But the minority needs to wake up and also keep engaging with citizens and telling the citizen, that this is a point. Because at a point is coming also where a citizen will not require, a political leadership to get, for example, get on the streets.
Yeah.
It's going to get tough. And we are seeing already businesses, closing, people being laid off. It's getting difficult.
I imagine that it is. It's 8:30. Let's take a break on this point and come back because now I want to make the linkage between now supplementary budget, what we're seeing, looking for more money to spend, and then looking at a place where the cost of living continues to rise on a daily basis. How do we link the two and say, well, it's possible to spend less at this level and then boost what happens then in the rest of the country? Or is it? And I think that's the question. James Marguri is our guest this hour, and we're looking at supplementary budgets, what Parliament has been discussing, and what can or cannot get easier for Kenyans looking into the next coming days. 8:30, Kenya's biggest conversation.